So, again, to just remind us to keep coming back to stabilizing our nervous system, being really aware in your body. So, there's some of these pictures that are here from last week as well. When we're working with climate change, we're working with images of disaster. And we're also working with images of people who are taking action, like Greta there with her school climate strike. And one thing that we didn't talk about last week, though, is that when we're dealing with climate catastrophe, we're dealing with that on top of everything else that's going on. So you might have your own very intense personal challenges right now. Somebody could be sick. You might have lost your job. There's all kinds of things that could be going on with your health or your family. So we're dealing with this on top of COVID, which this worldwide pandemic we're all dealing with social injustice, and on top of our own. So it's helpful for us to know and just to acknowledge that feeling overwhelmed or feeling in a fight, flight, freeze response a lot of the time is easy to understand when we look at the global picture as well as our nervous system and how it responds to our challenges. So in 1988, the New York Times kind of started to warn people about global warming. And I remember during that time, there was a lot of dismissing of that. A lot of scientists were going, no, that's not true. Other scientists are going, well, actually, yes, it is. This is the science on it. And a lot of the polarization around that was already starting between the right and the left. The Inconvenient Truth and Inconvenient Truth with Al Gore came out. A lot of you remember that. And that was in 2006, which is a long time ago now. It's 15 years ago. And that really brought a lot of our attention to it. So, what's happening now in 2021, I think, is that with the fires, the floods, the different disasters that we're having, record breaking high temperatures, it's getting harder to dismiss it now. It's getting harder to argue that it's not actually happening. So, now we're starting to let it land a little bit more. And some of us have let it land for, a few decades now. And some of us, it's a little bit newer that it's coming onto the front of our attention, to the front burner. But how are we going to work with this in a way that just doesn't let the nervous system take it over? So just to check in again with your breath. These are big, big, scary things that are happening. And we can feel overwhelmed because we don't feel like we can do much about it just on our own. So lots of us are doing what we can. We're conscious about how much power we use. We try to minimize our use of driving around, or we buy an electric car, we bike to work, that kind of thing. We recycle. And some people are more in the activist side, writing letters, attending rallies or protests, and we're trying to protect the diversity in the environment. Many of us are educating ourselves. One of the things about this provincial park that's being delisted in Nova Scotia is that now people can kind of look at that from an environmental aspect as well. And they're like, oh, okay, this is a very environmentally sensitive area. And there's a lot of value to protecting that. And so a lot of people now are going like, okay, yeah, there is a serious value to protecting our natural places. But then in addition to that, in addition to all of the education and the way that we're starting to change how we think about it and the way that we do the best that we can personally, we also fly. We get away to a vacation or we want to be with family. People are really spread out now. So we might reduce the amount that we do that, but it might be something that's never really been part of our consciousness around that. It's like we're not connecting some of the things we do, or we're not able to really stay with that. So let's look at some of the feelings that come up around this. And we'll just take a minute or so on each of them. So there's guilt for sure. I believe the science. I still don't do enough. I go away on vacations. I fly. I drive a car. If I really wanted to change this, I would not behave the way I do. The guilt being behavior focused. And as you're paying attention to that, notice if there is also shame. I feel like a bad person because of my behavior. So are you internalizing the guilt about behavior into, I'm just a horrible person? And one thing we can do with shame is to move it out of the body. So if you're feeling that, let yourself feel that for a moment. It feels heavy, feels like we want to get away from it. And so lift your chest a bit, lift your eyes, open your eyes. Take a couple of deep breaths. It's never helpful to shame ourselves. There's a lot of shaming going on, a lot of polarizing and a lot of shaming. So just to try to be aware of that. We can stay with the guilt in terms of the responsibility. How am I going to work with the responsibility and the power that I do have? But to try and stay out of a shame storm. And sometimes to get away from feeling guilt and shame, we go into defiance. And we want our air conditioning. We want a nice car. We want to be able to take vacations. We want to do all of these things. And instead of being kind of neutral about it, we get into some kind of a defiance, a fight response. Another part of the fight response is when we look at politicians and the big business and the lobbying and the undue influence. It feels like the people that are running this, our response to climate emergency, are the ones that are making money on us. So that can really get us hot and feel really angry. And then what do we do if we feel like, well, I can't make a difference? So we cycle through all of these. And then the underlying fear could be certainly what's going to happen in my lifetime. And if you're in the western part of the United States or Canada, with all the fires going on right now, and in Northern Ontario here, and there's a lot of really current, present moment fear. How will I live? And how will my children live if we go through into the future 10 or 20 or 50 years? What have we done? So come back into your body and notice the effect of this in your body. And notice what sensations are here. There might be a flight response, feeling edgy, restless. Maybe I should just get up and do the dishes while I'm listening, or whatever it might be. I'm going to turn this off. What am I doing? I'm going to go for a walk. So there's all kinds of responses like that. Or we might be completely, just feeling gut punched. So give yourself credit for being here. Notice your body and your breath. We're here because we care. And we want to work with this in maybe a different way than we have been. So you could hold your own hand. You could do some box breathing. You could stand up and shake it out. So let's just together do some box breathing just to bring ourselves back into regulation. So inhale deeply. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. And then breathe in and breathe out. And notice if that helped. to bring you back into regulation. You might have not been really dysregulated, but just to bring you back. Freeze is one of the predominant responses that we're having, a lot of us are having in terms of climate change. Shame, it really immobilizes us. So doing something like this where we're tuning into how we feel, and when we share, we realize that other people also have a very similar set of thoughts and feelings and experiences with this. So it makes us feel like we're not broken or somehow weird or something. This is something that's really common, that we have a big global emergency, not just COVID, but the climate emergency as well. And it helps to know that we're not alone in that. One of the big responses that happens when we're in freeze is that we kind of give up. So it's true that the environment is in trouble. It's true that it would have been so much better if we started getting serious about this 20, 30 years ago. But it's also true that sometimes we have taken steps like the fluorohydrocarbons that were ruining the ozone layer. When it became evident that that was happening, everybody got together and basically changed what was going on, and the ozone layer is in much better shape now. If we hadn't done that, we probably wouldn't have much of an ozone layer, and we'd be in very much more serious trouble right now. And when it became clear that DDT was inhibiting the way that birds could reproduce, it was making their shells really weak. And there was a big environmental impact on that. A lot of the activism is what changed that, and that was banned. And even now in a lot of stores, I don't know about it in the United States, but in Canada, you can't buy certain herbicides and pesticides. They're off the market now. You can't use them. So one thing that we do know is that taking action can help, and it does. We do actually change the trajectory of what's going on when we can take action. And it's also true that we have lost a lot of biodiversity. So if we focus on the loss without balancing it, it can feel even more overwhelming. And one of the things that they were discovering when they were talking with people about climate change is that a lot of people are just in a grieving process of, well, it's too late. There's nothing that we can do. And it's not actually too late. If we can understand, I'm in a freeze response, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling like it's too late, I'm guilty, I'm ashamed. If we're lost in that, we're not going to be able to take action. So it's very important for ourselves and for everybody else that we manage our nervous system in a skillful way and come up with a freeze. So when we're threatened, we know this. We go into fight, flight, freeze, and in some cases fawn when it's more of a social, where we appease. And when that happens, our higher level brain goes offline. That's the really important part here, is that just when we really need it, we can't think. We're in a fight, flight, freeze response. We feel overwhelmed. We just want to have a break from it. We want to ignore it for a little while. And if we look at other kinds of social injustice, we might look at racism, for instance. And one of the things that people of color might say is, well, you get to take a break from it, but I don't. This is my life every single day. I don't know what's going to happen when I walk to the store. And that's a threat that you don't have to think about. So with climate change, it's a similar kind of a flight response of, I'm overwhelmed, I can't take anymore. And so this is normal, it's natural, and it's good to not shame ourselves for having a nervous system and having these responses. So when we feel emotionally flooded or angry, overwhelmed, we know that that's what's going on. It's common, it's normal, and we don't have to stay there. So for the next several minutes, let's work with some feelings. One of the ways that we work with feelings is we feel the sensations and energy of that in our body as well. So try to stay embodied, like in your body when we're working with this. So I feel sad about, and you could go through them, I'll kind of name them, but you could also just go for in your own order, kind of tune me out. Go in your own order and let yourself go through these in the sequence, or maybe just one or two of them that feels right for you. Really stay grounded. Right now, in this moment, what I'm doing is feeling my emotions about this. I feel sad about. And you might have very specific things coming up. It might be more of a kind of a heaviness in your chest, a more of a somatic body reaction. I feel guilty about. And notice what the words are. If you can create a picture or an image, I feel guilty that I didn't take this seriously. I feel guilty that I haven't stopped using my car. I feel guilty that as you're letting these come up, let them in just a little bit at a time. Put them in a frame. You can look at them with your eyes open. Look at them like they're on the wall on the other side of the room. You can do some tapping on your forehead. Take your attention away from the images, away from the words, just into the sound and sensation of the tapping. So we're not trying to make them go away. We're just trying to not get overwhelmed by them. We're trying to stay present. And if you're working with the fear, even more important to stay really grounded in this moment. So the fear might be I'm afraid of the rise of the ocean levels and what's going to happen to all the millions of people that live there right at the ocean, or what's going to happen, whatever it is that you're afraid of. Notice whether that's an immediate threat in this moment. Probably not. This is a threat that's looking into the future. So we're not trying to ignore the future. We're trying to be clear and at the same time acknowledge and feel the safety in our body. So stay in tune with your breath. And for this kind of work, it's sometimes helpful to keep your eyes open so that when you're visualizing something, put it on the wall on the other side of the room or put it into a frame. Try not to let yourself have it fill your whole visual field. Notice how you feel in your body, and also notice the safety in your body right now. Your feet on the floor. You can put your hands on your heart. One thing that's pretty common with looking at some of these is that we might either be in a state of numbness. We're feeling like we're kind of overwhelmed and there's just too much here. We're just kind of backing away from it. Or there might be just this chaos of images and what about this? And then there's that and this. So if you're having that really busy, chaotic kind of response, see if you can put all of them into a frame, like a collage of pictures or images or words. Look at it. Okay, there's a bunch of things here. Is there one that really attracts your attention? If so, you could look at that. Kind of narrow your focus into just that. Or you could look at the whole thing like a collage and notice if you can put it into a frame. Your eyes just kind of take in what's there. Words have shapes. If it's a very intense font, it's going to feel a little bit more scary, maybe. Images. What's in your view? And then look and see, this is colors and shapes. This is what my mind has created. My mind has brought this forward. These are some of the things that I'm afraid of or I feel guilty about. And maintain that perspective. These are things that you're looking at, you're witnessing, you're aware of. You could take your eyes to the space on the outside of the frame, take them around a couple of times in each direction, just in the empty space. Take some deep breaths. I'm grieving the loss. What comes up when you think about what we've lost? Certainly biodiversity, loss of habitat, loss of innocence. What does that feel like in your body? And let it come in just a little bit. Don't let it overwhelm you. It's fine to back away from it. I'm going to take about 2 more minutes to work with this. So continue to notice what you feel in your body, especially. Use all of your tools to stay stable. Kind of back away from it enough that you can remember that you're not in that situation right now. You're not fleeing from a wildfire. You're in a safe location. And we're looking into these. How do I feel? It would be really normal for you to be cycling through fight, flight, freeze, and then back into awareness. Maybe into fight again, and then back into overwhelm. That would really be normal. So if that's happening, that's okay. So let's take a minute here as you're coming back to do a bit of shaking. So if you wanted to stand, sometimes it's good to stand in kind of a strong way. Feel your feet on the ground and then start to shake through your lower legs, through your hips. You can shake your hips side to side, shake your shoulders, your arms. Let your whole body shake for a moment. Shake out some of the emotion. Let it flick off the ends of your fingers. Take a few deep breaths. And then bring your hands up over your head in fists. And then as you breathe out, throw the energy down into the ground and open your hands. So make some noise if you want. And come back in. So let's set aside, not to shove it down or suppress it, but just set aside some of the feelings and know that we can come back to this. And if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed right now, you might want to take a break from this, or you could just see if you could shift into this mode instead. We're going to move into action. So the first question, or an early question in this, is to bring to mind some people that are safe to talk with about this. And some people are not going to be interested. Some people might have such a strong reaction of, going into a catastrophic thinking storm or something that it's not going to be maybe helpful for you to open that conversation with them. But how would you bring it up? And who would you bring it up with? And what might you say? What might you want to share? We're going to have like an imaginary conversation about that in our mind for a moment. And it might be something like, yeah, I'm really scared of what it's going to be like for my children and grandchildren. I feel guilty about not doing enough. Is that something you feel too? Or this is one of the ways that I'm working with that. I'm really trying to stay out of denial. And we know that taking action is helpful. And the phrase, think globally, act locally, is very appropriate here. What are some local issues that you have? Or maybe you want to work more on a national scale, get involved with one of the national organizations around climate change. Maybe you want to get involved with some lobby groups of pressuring politicians to take more serious action. What is it that you could do? What are some actions you could take fairly soon? In your own life, who could you talk with? Who could you work with maybe? Is there some research you need to do to find out what's going on, who's doing what locally or in your area? The one thing is to try to be specific enough that it's not overwhelming. So maybe I'm going to work specifically around protecting the biodiversity of this park, of raising awareness before the election that's going on. Or maybe I'm going to work specifically around how we manage forests and what happens with the forest fires. Maybe I'm going to donate money to people that are collecting food, Red Cross or some organization. What is it that you could do? So let's come back to the group now.